to Simple Conversations with ASG.
George is a bit of a different kind of character to the rest. They all kind of have standout personality traits, but George seems to be this person that headstrong, driven, dedicated. But then you hear about an addition to the room he made in Hamburg. Can you please go through this? Because I'm going to butcher this if I try and explain. Because I can't get it in my head at all.
So when they first went out there, which was August 1960, the place they were playing was the Indra Club. And the guy who owned the Indra Club, Bruno Koschmider, he'd arranged for them to go out there and play. And they were playing every night, 6 to 8 hours. They thought they'd be staying in a hotel. They weren't. What they were given was 2 dingy rooms at the back of a cinema with virtually no light. And you could hardly see anything in there. They didn't take much with them. And for most of the first few weeks, they didn't leave the confines of the Grosse Freiheit, which was the street they were on. So where they were staying, you literally crossed the road, went 50 yards, and that was the club. So that's all, they just stayed around there. And they were keeping weird hours as well. So of course, because they started playing early evening, and that could be going through into the early hours. And then, as they soon found out, naturally, they got very, very tired. So they were given these, it's like it was a slimming pill called the Pralidin, Prallies as they were known. And so you'd have one of those and it would give you energy. But by giving you energy, it made you thirsty. So you need to drink more. And all the drink available was alcohol. So you got this mix going on through the whole night. And then you get back to your bedroom and you couldn't really see what was going on. And sometimes you would feel sick. And so he vomited. I thought, well, I'm not clearing that up. Well, I'm not clearing that up either. And so nobody cleared it up. And it was added to, and it just became part of the furniture, this little mountain of vomit. Some of the stories, when you listen to them, of the rooms they were staying in, because the beds weren't comfortable. It was freezing cold. They had no bathroom, so they had to use the ladies' toilets behind the cinema to get washed in. And one of the famous things was Georgie being a young 17-year-old when he went out there, and they were all teasing him because he hadn't lost his virginity. So an arrangement was made, and in the darkness of the room, George gets his girl, and at the end, they all stood around and shouted, cheered, and applauded. So they got up to all sorts there, and it was your classic rock and roll story. It's a terrible digs to live in. It was a shocking place. But because they were so young, it was so much fun because they were let loose in the fleshpot sex city capital of Europe. It was nothing compared to Liverpool. It was so different. Neon lights, strip shows, everything going on. They had no idea. I think Paul said in one polite BBC interview, and said, and it looked like fun, and we had some fun. And it was the kind of thing, young lads out there let loose. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll and stuff, and they had such a good time. I'm thinking of George. For George, it was all about the music, and he said, as the Beatles, their best time for playing live was 1961 at the Top 10 Club in Hamburg, and they played for 92 nights consecutively. But they could pick whatever songs they wanted to do. He said, and we'd learned by then how to entertain a crowd. We were so tight as a band, and the PA system and stuff was state of the art. Said that's when we were at our best. And I think that's what upset him the most with touring. Because in Hamburg, they'd grown as musicians so quickly to be so good and better than any other band in Liverpool. And then all that musical development is then stunted and almost stopped because you're just flying around places playing the same boring 10 songs. And people can't hear you because all the girls are screaming. And as a musician, when you're on stage, you feed off the crowd. And if all they're doing is screaming and not listening to you, what's the point of doing any of this? And I think that was the biggest problem for George. was stopping touring, because he was always just about the music. That's what was important to him. And if you're not touring and you're not progressing, then he would then try and develop himself, but by doing that in his own home studio. And again, that's the issue we were talking about before. They got so much money. They got these massive big houses, and each one's got its own home studio. So they're learning stuff on their own and then bringing it in, but you're not growing and developing as a group.